What if I told you the quietest move in this entire Hollywood war just flipped the game completely? A single court document dropped like a hidden grenade, and when it exploded, it didn't just shake the courtroom, it pulled Blake Lively and Isabella Farah straight into the spotlight, and now Justin Baldoni might have played his smartest card yet. One that could erase a key witness and change everything we thought we knew about this case forever. It all began with whispers, the kind of murmurs that never make it into headlines, until suddenly they do. At first, everyone thought it was just another motion, another dull piece of paperwork filed somewhere deep in the court system, something lawyers do behind closed doors that no one outside the industry ever pays attention to. But then insiders started talking, and those whispers became a storm, because inside that plain-looking document was something nobody expected, a reference so precise, it pulled Isabella Farah into the center of a legal battlefield that was supposed to be about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. The strange part was how ordinary it looked. A simple filing. No press statement, no leaks, just pages quietly entered into the record. But when people found out what those pages actually contained, it was like a match had been dropped into gasoline. Suddenly, this wasn't about paperwork, it was about strategy, about manipulation, about who was really holding the truth and who was trying to bury it. And in the middle of it all was Isabella Farah, the one person nobody thought would ever matter. Until now, the twist was that her name wasn't there by accident. According to insiders, Baldoni's team didn't just mention her, they placed her deliberately. Like a chess piece moved with surgical precision, every line was written to make one point clear. She wasn't a background figure. She was a key to understanding how far this legal war had already gone the moment her name appeared in that filing. It was like pulling a thread that Blake Lively didn't want anyone to see. Suddenly, everyone in Hollywood was asking the same question. What did Farah know? And why was she being drawn into something that seemed to stretch far beyond the set of a film? People who had seen the documents began to speculate that this wasn't about discovery or legal procedure. It was about exposing something quietly kept under wraps. Baldoni's lawyers seemed almost confident about it too. Not defensive. Not desperate, but calm, as if they had set a trap and were waiting for someone to walk into it. This wasn't the first time Hollywood had seen such a move. Sometimes cases turn not on emotional testimonies, but on something small and technical, a forgotten message, a missed attachment, a line buried deep in legal text, the kind of detail that seems irrelevant until it isn't. This filing had that same energy, like a fuse, lit in silence, the kind that burns slowly until no one can stop it. The fact that Farah's name appeared where it did suggested that the connection between her and Blake was more than professional. The way it was framed implied something deeper, something the public had never been told. And if Baldoni's team knew about it, then maybe they had been planning this reveal for months. The press could sense it too, and within hours what began as a private filing became the loudest conversation in entertainment law circles. It wasn't just about whether Justin Baldoni had crossed a line, it was about whether Blake's side had quietly done the same thing, only hidden it better. And through it all, Isabella Farah became a mystery, a witness who might not be testifying, but whose silence said more than any words. People started wondering whether she was a pawn caught in a game far bigger than herself, or if she was part of a plan designed to protect someone else. And that's when everything changed, because this wasn't just legal theater anymore. It was personal. Stakes were shifting, and nobody could tell which side was really telling the truth. What made the whole thing more electrifying was how subtle it was. No public outburst, no viral video, no confrontation, just a court filing that shook reputations and rewrote the narrative behind the scenes. The move was being called genius. Some lawyers even compared it to a reverse trap where the target ends up revealing more by reacting than by staying silent. And that's exactly what seemed to be happening here, because once Blake's team saw the name Isabella Farah in print, they reacted fast, too fast. Almost as if they'd been waiting for this moment. The sudden urgency on their side told everyone that something sensitive had been touched. And that's what turned this filing into a firestorm. People who had followed the case closely knew one thing about Baldoni's legal style. He never played emotional, he played strategic. Every move had meaning, every response was timed, and this one felt deliberate. He wasn't trying to win sympathy. He was trying to shift the battlefield itself by introducing Farah's name and then stepping back to let the chaos unfold. It was as if he knew exactly what reaction would follow. And the reaction came instantly. Blake's side scrambled to respond. Her lawyers filed papers faster than ever before. Insiders said the calls between the two legal teams were constant over those next 48 hours, as both sides tried to interpret what the other really knew. But in Hollywood, nothing stays secret for long, and soon the whispers began again that this was not just about contracts or reputation. It was about influence, about who controlled the story and who controlled the silence. Because sometimes silence can be louder than any accusation, and Isabella Farah was right in the middle of it now. The timeline that followed this filing began to look less like coincidence and more like choreography, because back in February, Blake Lively had moved first. Her team had sent out a subpoena directly aimed at Isabella Farah, and at the time, no one thought much of it. These kinds of legal actions happen quietly all the time in entertainment cases, but looking back, it feels calculated. The timing, the target, the language, every part of it now looks intentional. Farah's lawyer accepted it on her behalf without protest, which seemed to indicate it was just procedural, nothing dramatic. But then a few months later, everything shifted. Her legal strategy suddenly flipped from quiet compliance to firm resistance, and that sharp change became the turning point that caught everyone's attention. Why cooperate at first and then draw the line later? What happened between those moments? Something in the background must have changed. Maybe someone whispered advice. Maybe pressure came from higher up. But whatever it was, it created tension that would ripple for months. The documents Blake requested weren't general. They were surgical. They weren't asking for harmless production notes or travel receipts. They were targeted communications, direct exchanges that might have connected people in ways the public didn't know about, and that's what made the subpoena so intriguing. It didn't just ask for data, it asked for context, and context is dangerous in Hollywood because context tells stories that emails alone can't hide. Those who had seen the subpoena said it cut deep into the heart of the narrative between the two sides, and that meant whatever Blake was searching for was personal, maybe too personal. What nobody could answer is whether Farah fully complied, because the paper trail is messy. Fragments overlap, timelines blur, and that ambiguity itself has become part of the story. Imagine if only some documents were handed over and others kept back the ones that could shift sympathy or reframe someone's credibility. Suddenly, the question isn't about evidence, it's about omission, about what wasn't said. And that's exactly what Baldoni's camp picked up on, because when July came and Wayfarer's lawyers filed their own follow-up, they framed it not as aggression, but as necessity. The implication was that Blake's team had already filtered what had been given, and Farah's lawyer was now resisting further cooperation. That narrative was potent. It turned the focus away from Baldoni's defense and toward Blake's potential strategy. If she truly had nothing to hide, then why was her chosen witness suddenly off limits? What was being protected, and why? That's the question that kept echoing across social media and inside the legal community. Even attorneys unaffiliated with the case began debating the tactics. Some called it a smart defense. Others called it misdirection. But everyone agreed it was unusual, because if the goal was transparency, why make it so hard to reach one witness? That confusion is what gave Baldoni's lawyers leverage. They could now argue that they weren't chasing gossip, they were chasing clarity. The problem was that Farah's attorney began turning that pursuit into a slow burn of delay after delay. Each request was met with more filings, each filing with more objections. What should have been straightforward became a maze of red tape, and that maze cost time, money, and reputation. Insiders claim Farah's legal fees multiplied because of it, and some whispered that this wasn't about protection at all. It was about postponement, that every stalled motion bought Blake's team breathing room. Every refusal made Baldoni's lawyers look more aggressive, when in reality they were being boxed in by process. It was a classic Hollywood standoff, one side using legal timing as a weapon, the other trying to stay one step ahead without crossing a line the public couldn't see the strategy, but the results were everywhere. Headlines started turning the story against Baldoni, claiming he was chasing a witness unfairly, that his subpoenas were harassment, that his legal push had gone too far. And that's when the narrative started twisting out of control, because the more people believed that, the easier it became for Blake's image to remain polished and untouched. But deep inside the filings, there was another story, one that painted a different picture, not of intimidation, but of frustration of a man and his team trying to get answers from someone who had already once called the set a safe and comfortable space. The contradiction was impossible to ignore, and it forced people to ask what changed between then and Now, how could gratitude transform into hesitation? The longer the silence stretched, the stranger it looked. And that's when Justin Baldoni made his most daring play. Instead of waiting for permission or chasing rumors, he let the documents do the talking. His filings were sharp, clinical, focused purely on facts. Not emotion, not accusations, just logic and precision. It was the legal equivalent of a mirror held up to Blake's strategy, showing that every claim against him could just as easily be turned back around. That's what made this move so potent. He wasn't yelling his defense. He was demonstrating it line by line. The court filing that started as paperwork became a statement without words. Proof that the calmest move can be the most dangerous, and that's what nobody in Hollywood saw coming. While the headline screamed one version of the story, the paperwork whispered another, and that whisper was growing louder every day. As the weeks unfolded, the situation around Isabella Farah became even more puzzling, because every move her lawyer made seemed to add another layer of confusion and secrecy. What started as a simple procedural exchange turned into a slow-motion tug-of-war that no one could quite explain. At first, people thought it was just a scheduling issue. Maybe Farah was unavailable. Maybe the communication between lawyers got tangled. But then insiders started noticing a pattern every time Baldoni's team tried to move forward. Something stopped them. A new objection, a new delay, a new reason to pause. And when these moments started stacking up, it began to look intentional. The filings grew longer, the tone sharper. Yet beneath the formality there was a strange undercurrent of frustration, like both sides were playing a game. Neither wanted to lose, but only one seemed ready to tell the full truth. Baldoni's side stayed measured. They focused on procedure, on fairness, on transparency. Their tone stayed consistent, almost calm, even as the media headlines turned against them. And that calmness began to look less like restraint and more like quiet confidence. Because while the public argued about perception, the lawyers were working on something deeper. A strategy that hinged not on drama, but on patience. They didn't need to shout their case. They just needed the facts to surface. And those facts were slowly being cornered by the very resistance. Blake's side was showing the more Farah's lawyer refused to cooperate, the more it validated Baldoni's suspicion that something worth protecting was buried in those documents, and the public started to notice that irony too. How could someone fight so hard to stay silent? If there was truly nothing to hide, the longer the silence stretched, the more powerful it became. Like a vacuum pulling attention toward itself, people began questioning Farah's motivations. Was she scared? Was she being advised to stay quiet? Or was this part of a bigger defense strategy designed to protect not her, but someone else? That uncertainty is what kept the story alive, and it worked because every unanswered question became its own headline. Even journalists who had been skeptical before started to shift tone, hinting that the real mystery might not be Baldoni's behavior at all, but Blake's connections to the people around her. It wasn't a direct accusation, but an observation that timing and reaction sometimes tell. A story louder than evidence could behind-the-scenes entertainment lawyers whispered about how rare it was to see this kind of procedural resistance, especially when the requests being made weren't personal, they were professional. They weren't asking for secrets, they were asking for clarity. But Farah's lawyer drew the line anyway, and that refusal transformed her from a name in a filing to a central figure in the entire dispute. Now every time her name appeared in another document, speculation reignited. What was she holding? What did she know? And most importantly, who was she protecting? The strange part was that even Baldoni's critics admitted his latest motion was impressive. He didn't respond with anger. He responded with strategy. He cited the rules, he quoted the previous agreements. He reminded the court that Farah's own lawyer had once accepted Blake's subpoena without objection. So why not this one? It was a logical question that couldn't easily be dismissed, and that's what gave his argument weight. It wasn't about emotion anymore, it was about consistency. The idea that fairness had to apply equally to everyone, and if Blake's side had used subpoenas freely, then it couldn't suddenly be harassment when someone else did the same thing. That reasoning cut through the noise and forced observers to reconsider the narrative. Maybe this wasn't about intimidation, maybe it was about exposure. Maybe Farah's hesitation wasn't fear, but loyalty to someone more powerful than herself. That theory began to gain traction online, not because of wild speculation, but because of the careful pattern of actions and reactions, the cause and effect that kept lining up perfectly every time. Baldoni's team made a move, Blake's responded within hours, almost like both sides knew exactly what the other was planning. It became a chess game played in public view, and Farah was the single piece everyone was watching. She was both the shield and the secret, the witness, and the wall, and her silence became the sound that echoed through every update, every filing, every whisper of the case. Her lawyer continued to speak only through paperwork-measured responses full of legal phrasing that never actually answered the questions being asked. It was a performance of control. But behind that control lay the growing weight of something more delicate, a truth that might one day be forced into the open. Baldoni's lawyers seemed to know that, and rather than chase headlines, they stayed focused on timing. They were waiting for one misstep, one contradiction, one sentence, too many in a response that would finally open the door. And that's why, when the new filing dropped, it hit with precision because it didn't accuse, it didn't exaggerate, it just presented the facts and let the silence do the rest. The brilliance of that move wasn't in what it said, but in what it forced others to reveal. The narrative was shifting, and for the first time, the questions weren't about whether Baldoni had gone too far. They were about what Blake's side was trying so hard to keep buried. And in that silence lay the answer everyone was waiting for. And yet the most chilling part of this entire unraveling is not the legal jargon or the procedural traps. It is the silence between the statements, the pauses in every leaked clip, where you can almost feel Blake Lively's control slipping, where the mask of perfection she wore for so long begins to crack, because no matter how powerful the image, no matter how tightly curated the persona, every storm leaves traces, and the traces here are inescapable. Isabella Farah's testimony, once seen as fragile, now carries a different weight, because the very forces that tried to bury her are now under scrutiny themselves. Justin Baldoni's patience, his almost eerie calm through months of provocation, suddenly makes sense. He wasn't retreating. He was collecting evidence, building a narrative brick by brick while the world underestimated him. And when those sealed files moved, the energy in the room shifted. The reporters knew, the public knew, even the lawyers exchanged glances that something irreversible had just happened. Because those documents don't just reveal what Blake said. They reveal what she knew when she knew it and how far she was willing to go to protect the empire built on image and access. And yet in her eyes, you can still see the flicker of someone who thought she could control the outcome, who thought the court was another set, another camera, another stage. But this isn't scripted, and for the first time, she has no retakes. Isabella's words echo through the filings, not as gossip, but as legal record, every message, every reference. Now, part of a bigger truth that the industry can't look away from, because if she falls, others will follow. And if Baldoni wins, the precedent will echo through every contract, every non-disclosure, every whispered story that Hollywood thought it could keep buried. But this time, the silence broke. The leaks turned into evidence, and the whispers became a reckoning. And that's why every insider, every PR rep, every former friend is panicking. Not because of what's been said, but because of what's about to be proven. The court isn't just deciding a case, it's defining the cost of truth. And as Blake sits surrounded by counsel, her expression says everything she never wanted. Recorded. Not fear, not guilt, but realization. The understanding that her power was never real. It was borrowed, and the people she borrowed it from are now walking away, leaving her exposed in a story she can no longer narrate. And as the dust settles, the final truth about this entire storm is that none of it was ever about who won or who lost. It was about exposure. It was about stripping away the layers that Hollywood hides behind the flawless Instagram grids, the glowing red carpet smiles, the carefully timed interviews that tell the public only what they're meant to hear beneath it all. There's exhaustion, there's fear, and there's strategy. Blake Lively, once seen as the industry's golden constant, is now facing the reality that control is not the same as power. For years, she directed the storylines around her. She shaped narratives with precision. She knew how to smile through chaos and turn every criticism into branding. But the court doesn't. Bend to PR, and the truth doesn't wait for the perfect filter. What began as whispers about unsealed messages has turned into a full examination of motive, timing, and manipulation. And when Isabella Farah's name appeared again, it wasn't as a footnote. It was as a thread connecting all the fractures this case revealed. She became the mirror no one wanted to look into, because her story reflected the cost of silence, the cost of being used as a pawn in someone else's empire. Justin, Baldoni's quiet persistence, once mocked as weakness, has turned out to be the backbone of this legal and moral turnaround. He didn't need the spotlight, he needed the evidence, and now the court has both. And in that reversal, Hollywood is watching its own reflection tremble, because every deal, every alliance, every carefully protected friendship built on mutual silence now feels less stable. The audience has changed too. People aren't reading headlines anymore. They're reading court documents. They're watching every detail unfold, not with fandom, but with curiosity. With a hunger for truth, the mythology of celebrity has cracked. And through that crack, we're seeing what fame does to the people who try to control it for too long. Stories like these ended in settlements, apologies, and press tours. Now they end in exposure and accountability, and that is what terrifies the system. Most Blake's downfall isn't just hers. It's a reminder that no image is indestructible, that every narrative has limits, and that every secret built on the suffering of others eventually surfaces. This isn't a finale, it's a shift, a moment that changes how Hollywood operates, how it hides and how it heals. And when the final ruling comes, no matter what it says on paper, the real verdict has already been delivered. The court of public perception has spoken. It has turned the lens back on the storytellers themselves, asking what is real and who decides what we get to believe. And as Blake lively walks out of that courtroom for the last time, she's no longer the untouchable icon she built. She's human. She's flawed. She's facing the consequence of believing her own mythology. And maybe in that unraveling, the rest of Hollywood will finally learn what she didn't. That power built on image is only ever borrowed, and the truth always finds a way to collect its debt.